From Wall Street to the White House, this is the Larry Kudlow Show. Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Larry Kudlow.
Hello, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. This is Protecting Your Future, and it is sponsored by Colonial Metals Group, the best in the business. Today, we're talking about protecting your future by keeping an eye on the stock market, which has been roaring. Let's bring in our two guests, Jack Bouroudjian, chairman of SmartX Data, Jim Iuorio, TJM Institutional Services. Jim Iuorio, the Trump trade is everywhere. Massive rally, 2,000 Dow points since the election. What do you make of it?
Well, I think I worry about it now because I think, as you've seen, the stocks have been a little weak over the last couple of weeks, maybe a week and a half. And I think what that's reflecting is all this talk about cutting government jobs, cutting spending. There is a slight worry about the pace. There's nobody who doesn't agree that that's the path to go and that's what we should be doing. But the pace that we do it could affect markets. So I think the markets want to be convinced that they're going to do it at the proper pace and not just try to fire 2 million people in the first month. And I know that those people probably are non-productive jobs.
They're not going to do that. Come on.
Good,
2 million
good,
people.
But the market needs to be convinced that. I agree that they're
stop.
Not.
You know, the guy's going to come in with an agenda of tax cuts, deregulation, slower spending, cut deficits as a share of GDP. I mean, of all the things to worry about, cutting too many federal jobs, really? I'm going to send them to Chicago. I'm going to send them all to Chicago. I'm going to send them there. I'm going to send them all. They're going to be like the illegals. We're going to send illegal bureaucrats to Chicago. That'll fix you guys. Jack Bouroudjian, did you ever hear anything so goofy? Really? Come on.
You know what? I love Jimmy. He's my brother from the Florida Exchange, but I'm going to have to disagree with him on this one. I think that over the course of ever since the election, Larry, we have had a buzz in the market.
Yes.
There has been something that has been happening, and the only thing that I can equate this to, all right, and I just told my son this very thing, is when Ronald Reagan was elected.
Oh, yeah.
Because we started to see that same feeling that we started, and that is exactly the way the market feels right now. You are going to free up seed capital. You're going to unleash an American entrepreneurial spirit that we have not seen. That's been stifled over the course of these last few years. You know, the market went up in spite of these Biden policies, not because of the Biden policies. When you take all of that and you start to unravel all of the regulation, all of the obstacles that were in the way of this market, that's what this market's telling you. This market has only begun to go up. And that's how I'm treating it just like I treated the election of Ronald Reagan without Tip O'Neill being an obstructionist.
No, we got our country back, and we're going to get tax cuts and deregulation, energy production. I hope Iuorio took notes of what you just said, Bouroudjian. I hope Iuorio. Somebody said he's in a cab. He's in a cab. I don't know. He's probably fleeing the country. I don't know where he is. Somebody said he was in a cab. I hope. So while you're in a cab, Iuorio, you buying Bitcoin? It's about to hit 100,000.
Yeah, I've had Bitcoin for 5-6 years. We've talked about this at length. They had me at proxy for fiat currency stewardship. You know what I mean? I've never had confidence in, and I have a lot more confidence in this particular administration's stewardship of our currency than I did the last one, without any question. But this one, now it's a case of broad adoption. If the U.S. government is going to be increasing their footprint in Bitcoin, potentially having a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Remember, the U.S. government is the second biggest, most powerful institution in the world to BlackRock, which is a joke, but it's not as much of a joke as I'd like it to be. And now BlackRock and the U.S. government being in it. So it's a case of broad adoption. So, yes, I'm comfortably long Bitcoin. I think there's a chance it ends in tears at some point in time, and nobody should be way overweight in it. But I think it has proven itself to be an asset of note that you should probably have some.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jack Bouroudjian, the Trump people want to deregulate cryptocurrencies. I mean, there's Gary Gensler's not going to be around. The Federal Reserve is going to have to change. The Treasury Department, we had Scott Besson on the show. It was his first interview since his designation. It's about deregulation. But what interests me, Jack Bouroudjian, is while Bitcoin went up so much, so did the dollar. The dollar exchange rate against other currencies has been very, very strong. which I think is part of the Trump trade. The dollar's now 107.5. The yen has fallen to 154. The euro has fallen to $1.04. The euro, I'm surprised, still trades at all. But anyway, the U.S. dollar is strong. And, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary designate, said several times on the program a little while ago that Mr. Trump and he both want the dollar must remain the world's reserve currency, Jack Bouroudjian, which I think is a very strong statement.
Well, a king dollar is back,
yes.
Larry. It's as simple as that. And remember, one of the reasons we saw both Bitcoin and gold going up is because of the debasement of our currency over the course of the last 4 years. People don't realize that. But we had a government that was out of control and printing up like drunken sailors and spending like drunken sailors. So, all of that is stopping. And that's really why the dollar is now becoming the focus, because people realize that. We're the only currency out there that's probably going to stop debasement. All right? And that is really one of the things that I
agree with this. Can I talk about that one too? Because I'm going to be back on board with you too.
Well,
go ahead. You can redeem yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Because I can foresee an instance where taxes are cut in the short term, which actually blows out deficits a little bit before supply-side solutions can filter into the market and bring the deficit down, because I do think deficits are coming down, but it might not be at the beginning. But I can foresee something where deficits are going higher and the dollar is still strong, and people are still are not going to be worried about inflation long term. So I agree with you on that part. I think it is a monumental shift to a supply side.
Why are you worried about deficits? You just told me we're going to cut all these government employees. Now you're still worried about deficits? I don't understand any of this.
I'm not worried about anything.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Look, we got our country back election night. That's the most important thing. Jack Bouroudjian, how long do you think this big stock market thing can go?
How about another 4 years at least, maybe 8?
Yes.
I think what we see is probably go into the April timeframe. That's usually when we start to see the market stabilize a little bit. But between now and then, there's a lot of cash on the sidelines that has been waiting for something like this. And, this is an environment, Larry, where PEs can blow out. You can see the market trading at multiples of 21, 22, 23 times comfortably in the S&P. And that is primarily because of policies that we're going to see passed within the next year.
Jim Iuorio, what do you do with bonds right now?
I don't want long-term bonds at all. And I think some of the reasons are bad, some of the reasons are good. I think when the Fed, when September 18th cut 50 basis points, I think there is a slight worry that inflation kicks back up again, and that's backed up by 10-year and 2-year break even.
Yes.
So I think that I wouldn't want that too. But I'd also think that people aren't buying bonds because they do believe in the growth story domestically too. I also think that regardless of how much spending is cut, there is big issuance that's coming to the table over the next year. So $1.4 trillion of debt service next year. I worry that the long end auctions are going to be met with less appetite. But I do eventually think that the Fed may step back in and bolster that, provided.
Well, I think. I don't know. I think people are selling bonds to buy stocks as a growth trade, as a Trump trade.
Yeah,
I think that's
what I said. I believe that too. I think there's a worry about inflation as well.
Well, you know what? On that point, I got to agree. Jack Bouroudjian, the 2-year break evens, 266. It's interesting. They're up 64 basis points year to date. The year's, coming to a close. I don't think the jumbo rate cut was wise. I don't think the November rate cut was wise. And I don't think the Fed will. I don't think they should or they will cut again in December. The Fed has been wrong again. Inflation is very sticky.
Well, it's not a question of what the rates are, Larry. It's a question of other policies that have been driving inflation. And if we can get all of those under control, then the Fed can probably do its job and we can see some normalcy, and because that's the problem. That's what's been missing in our interest rate environment. And Jimmy will be the first one to tell you that. So once we get back to where we've got serious policies that can constrain some of the spending, that can actually take us to a place where the market can determine interest rates properly, And I think that's really where, hopefully, we're going to see, the new secretary designate take us. I mean, here's a guy who understands markets. He's a lot like, Bob Rubin was when Rubin came in. And that's one of the reasons the market, quintupled under Bob Rubin. People don't realize that because he understood he needed to watch bonds. He needed to pay attention to the vigilantes because they were going to tell him the story of whether he could do what he wanted to do.
That's a very, very, very good point. A very important point. By the way, it was Robert Rubin, former Treasury Secretary from Goldman Sachs, who started up the break-evens. He was the guy that started all that. And it's a very useful thing. Jim Iuorio, what about commodities? What are you making out there?
I love commodities, particularly ones like the platinum group, platinum metals, because I do believe that Donald Trump will start to butcher the Inflation Reduction Act, rightly so, maybe even take away subsidies for EVs.
Yes.
So copper, I think, is struggling. I wouldn't touch that. But if we're going to move back toward internal combustion engines, yes. Gold, silver, still yes on those things. If the break-evens are right, and 2.6 is really the rate of inflation over the next 2 years, which I think the Fed, by the way, would be relatively comfortable with. Commodities should do quite well. I'm not saying anything about the agriculture commodities, but the hard commodities, the stuff that Dennis Cartman used to say hurts when you drop it on your foot with gold, silver, platinum, palladium.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And finally, Jack Bouroudjian, bank stocks have done extremely well, and there's going to be some deregulation of banks. Certainly, I'm going to guess at the Treasury Department, Mr. Besson is not going to want to force banks into more capital because they're already overcapitalized. So that's a good thing. And he's going to let them make loans to oil companies if they want to make loans. But bank stocks have done great, Jack Bouroudjian.
Well, that's one of the other bullish signals, Larry. It's telling you there's going to be a lot of M&A activity. There's going to be a lot of lending that takes place. And again, you're freeing up capital. Over the course of these last few years, you had bankers basically biting their nails. They couldn't lend out money. They had to sit on capital. It was becoming cumbersome to be a banker. It's one of the reasons that banking stocks in some cases didn't do as well as the rest of the market. But all of that is going to be unleashed. So I think, it's funny you said that because financials are my number one pick, I think, for next year. I think we're going to see these banking stocks. We're going to see the Morgan Stanleys of the world, just do amazing. And I think they're going. And what we're seeing today is basically just the fear of market underperformance.
It's great stuff, Jack Bouroudjian. You have the spirit of the times. Terrific stuff. And my friend Iuorio is going to take a cab back to the suburbs someplace. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll talk soon. All right, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and then do some money in politics with Liz Peek and Steve Moore. Other side of the break, I'm Kudlow. Please stay around.
Larry Kudlow.
Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better. With services close to all New York and New Jersey cemeteries, Eden Memorial Chapels offer fair and balanced pricing and can provide easy transfer of you and your loved ones to Israel. While you're grieving, they're here to take care of all the details so that you deal with less bureaucracy and have more peace of mind. Go to EdenMemorial.com. That's EdenMemorial.com.